Good morning and welcome. I still have some folks trickling in, but we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Alan Moran. I'm a member of the North Carolina Board of Transportation. Question in the session app. The poll question is up on the screens. For those who don't have the app, it is what do you think could be the most affected by changes to transportation infrastructure due to climate change? And we'll come back to that poll question at the end to see the results of the question, the answers. As you all know, climate change has been a major issue for many years now. It's something we're constantly dealing with where I'm from on the Outer Banks of North Carolina. Today we have three folks here to talk with us about how we can prepare. First, we'll hear from Linda Darr. She's the president and CEO of the American Council of Engineering Companies. Linda's career spans for over 30 years with a primary focus on transportation and infrastructure policies. She was previously appointed to serve as a Deputy Assistant Secretary of Budget and Programs with the U.S. DOT, helping the President build and develop in the Mississippi Delta. Linda currently serves on the board for the University of Denver Transportation Institute and sits on the U.S. Chambers Committee of the Top 100 Trade Association CEOs. Please join me in welcoming Linda Darr.
I didn't know you were from the Outer Banks. Where? What part? Manio. God, I love. We go. During COVID, I mean the first year of COVID, I spent 9 weeks in the Outer Banks. Individual weeks, just kept going back and renting these great beach houses. It was, loved it.
Your time.
Yeah, well, I've dropped a lot of money there. I can assure you that. So I want to thank the organizers of this panel. This is my first time at a North Carolina DOT event, so I'm happy to be here with you all today. This is an important topic. It's a difficult topic. Even in the engineering community, I expected everybody to kind of be of one mind when they look at climate change and understanding that it was real. But that's not the case. There's few rooms that you go into where people all agree on this, but certainly the contributors are things that we're having to look at, and the impacts are more real every day. So I don't think I have to tell you all that climate change and extreme weather is real. I mean, you all are experiencing that yourself, just like everybody around the country. But I do think that it's important when we talk about this to put it into context. According to the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, in 2019, concentrations of atmospheric carbon dioxide were higher than at any time in 2 million years. I don't know how they know that. I don't know that we have records going back 2 million years, but somebody figured that out. Concentrations of methane and nitrous oxide were higher than at any time in the last 800,000 years, and the global mean sea level has risen faster since 1900 than over any preceding century in at least the last 3,000 years. So it's happening. When the interstate highway system, when you think about this, was designed and built in the 1950s, the kind of things that we're talking about today weren't part of the plan, right? Emissions, waste, environmental impact, equity, digital connectivity, none of these things that were concepts that were written into the planning documents that delivered those highways. A lot of people, I think, don't realize it, but President Eisenhower supported the system because he wanted a way of evacuating cities if the United States was attacked by an atomic bomb. Fear is always a great motivator. I think our motivator has changed today. The motivations for our designs today have more to do with the health of the planet, economic mobility, jobs, global competitiveness, and certainly quality of life. And when we look at infrastructure in broader terms, as it is being viewed in this new construct in the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, this expanded view of infrastructure, we even start to look at cyber issues, both in terms of threats and many opportunities that are presented by an increasingly more digital world. So engineers, and I am shamelessly promoting engineers because that's my job to do so, but engineers are needed more now than they ever were and more certainly than they were in the 1950s, because infrastructure needs are growing increasingly more complex. Climate change obviously is an enormous factor in the design work that our firms do to produce the infrastructure of the future. This is not your grandfather's infrastructure. You all know that. America's engineers are tasked with the challenge of designing the built environment in a way that incorporates a wide range of challenges presented by climate change, whether it's roads, bridges, airports, medical facilities, factory floors, or water supply systems. Those structures can't fail us. We've seen what happens when they do. Think of places like Texas last winter, right? So we need to adapt, and engineers are in charge of kind of being the first ones in to do the analysis and to figure out how we're going to adapt and then to ultimately make it happen. In addressing the challenge of climate change, engineers focus on both the things that add to the climate change and then the impacts from the climate change. Both are equally important. Engineers have have been very creative and innovative. Most recently, in the last 10 years or so, we've really seen a ramped up focus on projects in this area. And we look at things, we always do, we have something called the Engineering Excellence Awards every year. And the projects that come through have increasingly focused on climate change. And they're projects like the Copper Hill Watershed Restoration Project in Tennessee, 20-year project to restore those lands. The Orange County Groundwater Replenishment System, or the Gills Onion Energy Recovery System. Both of those are in California, and the Gills Onion Recovery System is basically using onion skins left over after processing to create energy. So, there's a lot that we can do. On the front end of projects, when we look at what adds to climate change, when we do our design work, we look at potential emissions from the structures that we design. A lot of people don't realize that the structures are emitting. They just think of traveling vehicles and, pipes going up in the air that are emissions. But our buildings and our infrastructure is emitting as well. We need to find ways to use materials that minimize the carbon footprint. Sometimes those materials are chosen because they are less polluting, and more recently, those materials can even be chosen because they are reducing pollution by capturing it. And then once the materials used to build those structures have been considered, engineers have to look at both the life cycle of the structures and then how the structures use energy. Ultimately, we want long-lasting, resilient structures with energy sources and uses that minimize emissions and the carbon footprint of the structure overall. Carbon reduction goals revolve primarily around the overall carbon impact of building materials such as concrete, metal, glass, and incorporate energy efficiency solutions into infrastructure elements right down from the skin of a structure to the mechanical and the electrical systems that we design to make it all work. So for example, instead of using concrete in a wall, designers are now using metal panels that use steel skins with an insulated foam core. Replacing concrete lowers the carbon footprint significantly while boosting resiliency and durability, which are also both important. New and more sustainable types of concrete are also available to use in our designs. One company recently developed a curing process that uses CO2 rather than water to produce high-performance concrete that cures in 24 hours rather than 28 days. Another promising technique that has emerged for concrete production uses fly ash, which is a byproduct of burning coal, for energy. Engineers are also behind the design of clean fuel and electric vehicle infrastructure, congestion mitigation strategies to minimize vehicle time on the road, using technology to monitor road conditions, and optimize traffic management. And finally, looking at the contributors to climate change, we need to consider sustainability of the structures themselves. Structures should be designed to last, to cut down on cost, and ultimately the polluting impacts of ongoing construction. Engineers today need to design structures that are built to last, and monitoring and maintenance of those structures is a critical part of that longevity ultimately. many firms are using digital twin technology to aid not only in the construction of infrastructure, but also in the maintenance of those structures. A digital twin, for those of you that might not know, is a dynamic, up-to-date digital replica of an asset that works by integrating the design of an asset with a system of embedded sensors to provide real-time operational data to simulate, to predict, and to inform decisions. So just like with cars and homes that you purchase, the ongoing maintenance is critical to the lifetime and the life cycle of our infrastructure. So there are many ways in which engineers work to mitigate contributors to climate change. Ultimately, the impacts we are feeling today are growing in frequency and intensity. In 2021 alone, there were 20 weather or climate disaster events in the U.S. with losses exceeding $1 billion each. Drought, floods, tropical cyclones, wildfires, severe weather, storms, they're all becoming the norm. Last summer, nearly 1 in 3 Americans experienced a weather disaster. In D.C. earlier this month, you guys can relate to this, and some of you might be from D.C., it was 65 degrees the day before I-95 shut down. And I-95 shut down for 50 miles after we had about 13 inches of snow, and hundreds of trucks and cars were stranded in snow and ice for almost 24 hours, including one of our 2 U.S. senators, Senator Kane, who I'm sure is on task now to deal with that. But it was insane. I mean, I've never seen anything like that. And then the next day, another thoroughfare shut down. It was another primary one. But the impacts are being felt all over the built environment. Temperature swings are causing roads to buckle. Increased tropical storms are causing buildings to deteriorate, like we saw so dramatically in Surfside, Florida. And rising sea levels are leading to flooding in places that we never expected. So engineers are basically dealing with a situation that's akin to a cleanup in aisle 6. We know the impacts will continue, so we need to figure out ways to adapt. So we adapt by building for resilience. Resilience means more financial investment up front, and that's important. This is the long view that we're taking. We need to work to protect our water and electricity supply, our roads and bridges that connect our communities, and the facilities in which we live and work. We need to protect against flooding and wind destruction, and to make sure that when we go back and ultimately rebuild, that, to use this administration's term, in the U.S. President Biden's administration, that we build back better, right? And that's really critically important. That's where the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act is providing much needed support. The IIJA is the single largest investment in America's infrastructure in more than a generation. It eclipses everything that we've done in the past, including the interstate highway system. Policies and programs that address climate change are at the core of the law, aimed at making roads more efficient, modernizing public transit and rail systems, investing in zero-emission or low-emission buses, creating electric car charging stations throughout the country. It includes $6.4 billion of formalized money for carbon reduction programs, a dedicated transportation resiliency program called PROTECT, with $7.4 billion of formula money and $1.4 billion in competitive grants and $2.5 billion for electric vehicle charging infrastructure. You know, it's even hard sometimes to put these numbers out there. I keep forgetting to say billions instead. I'm always thinking in millions. Now we're talking about billions, and then on top of that, we're talking about trillions. It gives you a sense of how enormous this change is. Overall, the IIJA is a $1.2 trillion investment in our nation's infrastructure. In North Carolina, based on formula funding alone, the IIJA will invest $7.2 billion over 5 years to improve roads and bridges here, to help get those drive times down, to get cars off the road sooner, and to help drivers ultimately save money and time. According to the U.S. DOT, on an average annual basis, that is about 28.7% more than the state's federal aid highway formula funding under current law. North Carolina can also compete for the $12.5 billion bridge investment program for economically significant bridges and $15 billion of national funding in the law dedicated to mega projects that deliver substantial economic benefits to communities. North Carolina can also expect to receive approximately $171 million over 5 years to reduce transportation-related emissions, in addition to about $194 million over 5 years to increase the resilience of your transportation system. So our engineering firms are eager to get started on these projects. There's a range of projects that are going to help North Carolina and the states all around the nation adapt to the impacts of changing climate. There's a lot more than I could say, but from my perspective, the bottom line is this. There is a lot that we need to do to minimize transportation and infrastructure-related contributions to climate change and the impacts that we're already experiencing. So engineers are the problem solvers in our world. They are growing increasingly fewer by the day. We don't have as many people coming into the industry, the profession, as we would like. And our research institute at ACEC projected that there's going to be 82,000 more engineers needed to do the work envisioned by the IIJA. And we are way behind as it is today, keeping up with the workload. So if you see an engineer today, please be kind. If you have students, that you're around, please point them in the right direction, because engineers are the ones that are going to help us deal with challenges like this and ultimately help us save the world. So thank an engineer today. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Next, we have Harry Sedus. He's the Executive Vice President of Customer Services and Solutions at Duke Energy. Harry has over 25 years experience in the energy industry. In his current role at Duke Energy, he is responsible for the development of long-term grid strategies and solutions. Harry previously served as the State President of Duke Energy's utility operations in the state of Florida. Please welcome Harry Sedus.
All right, thank you, and good morning, everybody. It's really great to be here. Thank you, Alan, for that. I'm going to do this sitting down just because I want to be more casual discussion here. Plus, I hate talking from the lectern there. I want to start off just telling everybody a little bit about Duke. Most people from North Carolina understand what we do and are served by us, but just for those that aren't, our focus is serving our 8 million customers in 7 states, providing them safe, reliable, affordable, and increasingly clean energy. We've committed to reducing our carbon emissions by 50% by 2030 and being net zero by 2050. So a lot of challenges ahead of us, but we're committed to those goals and helping the climate and carbon reduction that our states and our country want to make. Today I wanted to focus on talking about climate impacts on our region and our company. And I think the slide's up there, right? I think everybody's seen many of these pictures, especially if you grew up in North Carolina on the coast. I know you see them in the Outer Banks all the time, as well as Florida. So when I think about climate change and how it impacts our region and our company, it's in 2 ways. The first and most visible and most impactful ways is the frequency and the strength of storms that we're seeing. So the picture you see there is 2018, Hurricane Michael and Hurricane Florence. The one on your left is Hurricane Michael, the 3rd strongest storm and a Category 5 that hit the Panhandle of Florida. Total devastation. I'll show you some pictures in a minute. The one on the right there is Hurricane Florence, not quite as strong, but just as impactful to the state of North Carolina. We've been lucky here in North Carolina and in Florida the last couple of years, but our friends in Louisiana and Mississippi and Texas have not been. So they've seen this type of impact there. So we're seeing more of these storms more frequently, and they're more powerful. And it's not just hurricanes, it's tornadoes. It's stronger thunderstorms with wind gusts that we haven't seen before. Winter storms. We're getting ready to deal with our 3rd winter storm here in North Carolina in 3 weeks. It's not even 3 weeks into January, and we've had 3 different snowstorms and ice storms. So very impactful these storms are across the states that we serve and the regions that we serve. Electricity is a necessity in life. We found during COVID that people really needed it even more than ever because they were at home working. So their homes became their work office, became their church, became their restaurant, became their school, became their home gym even. So having electricity is always crucial. When people lose their power in storms, bad things happen. People can die. People can be impacted. The economic devastation that happens in these communities. Alan talked about being from the Outer Banks. When you have a storm in the Outer Banks, you're not renting many houses. The restaurants are empty. The economic impact is very bad. I wanted to show a few more pictures of some of this devastation that is unusual over the years. Again, this is from Hurricane Florence. I'm trying to look at the slides backwards here. The one that looks like a river there, guess what that is? That's Interstate 40 to Wilmington. That's not a river. It looks like a river, but it's not a river. So imagine trying to get to Wilmington or trying to move trucks to Wilmington in that storm. Didn't happen. I went to Wilmington to visit with the crews a couple of times during that storm. I had to take 3 different paths on 3 different days to drive down there because of the different flooding and the different crusting. The other picture on that slide shows our Wallace Substation. That's 10 feet of water in a substation that was designed to handle a 100-year flood. This was our 3rd 500-year flood, not in 1,500 years, but in less than 25 years. We had Hurricane Floyd in 1999, Hurricane Matthew in 2016, and Hurricane Florence in 2018. So that is impactful. We saw water in places we never dreamed of having water. I know the DOT folks probably saw water over bridges that they never dreamed of as well. So very impactful. This shows the impacts from Hurricane Michael in the Panhandle of Florida. This is Mexico Beach, which was where the eye went over at 160 miles an hour. Our system there was totally destroyed. Not a single pole, single wire stood when the storm went through there. There was buildings that were beachfront that were now across the street. So the power of that storm and storm surge is unbelievable. Luckily, most people evacuated, but there was about 40 people that hunkered down and rode that storm out, believe it or not, on that little town of Mexico Beach. So we're seeing a lot more of this damage. What are we doing about it? So we're focused on making the right investments. Our states have been very supportive. Our stakeholders have been very supportive in making these investments, targeted investments, using data analytics and real-time weather data and future data predictions to really target where we can strengthen our system and make the resiliency better. Stronger poles, bigger poles, targeting undergrounding, where wires we put underground so that we don't have the damage from trees and other structures that happen. We're looking at flood mitigation, and again, the states have been very supportive in this. Here in North Carolina, we recently had in the budget that was passed last fall a couple of provisions to help mitigate flood and resiliency. A couple of our representatives and senators were very key in that. Representative Bell and Senator Perry from Goldsboro and Kinston, which are very hard hit in these flooded areas there on the Neuse River, and they had some of the same issues during Florence as we saw from the Cape Fear River on the slide before. We're building walls around some of these substations to mitigate the flooding and keep those in service. We're changing our design standards. When we build a new substation, we're not going by the 100-year flood levels anymore. We're looking at those 500-year level floods that are coming more often. So a lot of good work going into that so that we're prepared for these storms that are coming. We're also looking at microgrid technology, coupling solar and batteries or renewables and batteries in those key installations, military bases, hospitals, hard to reach areas, places that have only one way in, one way out, that power restoration takes a long time. Can we put generation there that segments them off of the grid to provide power, get them back working while the crews can finish the other work? So a lot of work in this resiliency space in all our states, and all the other utilities in the Southeast are doing this as well. The Southeast is very prone to these type of storms, ice storms, hurricanes, those type of things. The second area that I think climate change is impacting our region and our company is around the desire for our customers, our states, and our national government to be cleaner, to have cleaner energy sources and decarbonize the economy. Our grid has been in service for over 100 years, and for most of those 100 years, over 120 years actually, it's been fairly unchanged. You know, the poles and wires, you know, I always used to joke, the poles are vertical, the wires are horizontal. If you get them inverted, then that's a bad thing. And not a lot has changed in those 100 years. The wire's gotten a little bit better, the pole material's gotten a little bit better, but all in all, it's fairly similar to what it was. But here in the last few years, technology has come to the grid with new technology, new sensors that allow you to do things differently. And we need that technology to be able to run two-way power flows now instead of just the one-way power flow. It used to be for 120 years it flowed from the power plant to the substation to the customer. Now the customer's generating. He may have batteries, he may have an EV, he may have solar, and that flows onto the grid the opposite way sometimes. So this technology helps accommodate that and enables these devices and this new generation and items that the customers want. EVs are becoming the thing. I think there's not a day on TV during football games that you don't see the Ford Lightning, F-150 Lightning, which is a very cool looking truck that can run your house and do all kinds of stuff. You can run your power tools off of it. All the big manufacturers are getting out of combustion engines. Many of them in the 2030 timeframe, 2035 timeframe. Customers want that. We need to decarbonize that part of the world. That's a third of our carbon emissions come from vehicles. But to do that, we can't have everybody go home at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and plug their car in when it's 95 degrees, because that will put undue strain on the grid. So we have to have the technology, the smart technology, to be able to segment when that load needs to happen, how we dictate that so that we can charge everybody's car, charge everybody's batteries, but not impact the grid, and be able to use clean resources, matching those clean resources to that. The other thing is batteries are becoming more and more items that people have in their car. Tesla's come out with their Powerwall, other vendors are coming out with that. That's going to allow different things to happen, customers to control their usage differently, and that's going to help us. But to be able to enable that, our smart meters, our sensors, our ability to communicate behind the meter to those customers is going to have to change to be able to control these things. So we're working on that. A lot of great work is going into that space, providing those customers with new data that we have now that we didn't have in the past, that allows them to shift their load to when it's more clean or when it's more costly or less costly, so they can manage their price a little bit better. That's always very important. The other thing is, as the nation and the manufacturers go to EVs, there's one particular area that's going to cause a lot of strain on our infrastructure. We talked a little bit about the residential folks. We don't need them to plug in at 3 o'clock all at once. But our concern and what we're working on and working on with others is around the depots, around airports, where UPS and FedEx and the Postal Service has all their trucks, all in one area, all on one grid, one part of the grid. And those loads today are, roughly a half a megawatt per depot. When they go fully electric on their vehicles, that's going to be up to 10 megawatts, 20 times more load on those grid circuits that aren't designed for that. So how do we get ahead of that so that those folks can convert their fleets, reduce the carbon footprint in society from those items is going to be crucial. And they want it, they're going to want it tomorrow. And, these infrastructure investments take time. So we're focused on that and making that happen. So I'm going to close by just saying, at Duke, we're building the grid of the future. so that we can deal with these impacts from climate change like storms, responding to them sooner, making them more resilient. But we're also building that grid of the future to enable folks to decarbonize. And all the while, we're going to provide safe, reliable, affordable energy to our customers. Thank you.
Thank you, Harry. And finally, we have Joe Gomez. We're moving to the southern. He's the Director of Public Works from the City of Miami. Joe brings over 44 years of experience in all facets of infrastructure, including planning, design, construction, operation, and maintenance. Since being confirmed as Director of Public Works for the City of Miami Beach by the City Commission in July of 2021, he is responsible for the third largest department in the city. He's been a member of the Florida Engineering Society since 1997 and currently serves as the Region 7 Vice President and Chair of the State Scholarship Committee. Please join me in welcoming Joe Gomez.
Good morning, and thank you very much. It's a real privilege and honor to be amongst fellow transportation individuals. Before I joined the City of Miami Beach Public Works Department, I spent a considerable amount of my career in the transportation field. Spent 10 and a half years working for the Florida Department of Transportation as Director of Operations in District 6. And as Mr. Sedus was pointing out in terms of storms, I lived through Hurricane Andrew in 1992, which was at that time the largest single catastrophe that had faced the United States. It was an incredible event. Fast forward 35 years later, and as the slides show, it's getting worse. I'm here to tell you that sea level rise, climate change is real. I fight it every single day of my profession. The challenges we face in Miami Beach are not unique to many other coastal areas of the United States. North Carolina is facing the same issues. South Carolina, all over the United States, and even the inland areas are facing the challenges of sea level rise. So let me tell you a little bit about Miami Beach, so you can get a perspective as to our barrier island is about just slightly under 8 square miles. Our resident population is about 90,000. It fluctuates. Our transient population, somewhere between 70,000 or so, daily people that come in to work. Interestingly enough, in 2020, height of the pandemic, we had over 3.1 million visitors that stayed overnight in the city of Miami Beach. So you can imagine in an area that's about 8 square miles, highly developed, when you have this influx of people coming in and out, the pressures on your infrastructure are incredible. Our infrastructure in Miami Beach is like many municipalities throughout the United States. It's way past its prime. It is in very poor condition. Pipes are corroded. They're rupturing. We had 3 force main breaks in one month at a very critical point exit from the island to the mainland. Three breaks in 1 month occurred, and all because the pipes are older. The groundwater is brackish, so you get that saltwater intrusion that comes up, goes down, air gets entrained in there, and all the ruptures happen on the bottom of the pipe. And if I were to show you the photographs, you'd be amazed. The pipe wall is almost gone, the thickness of the pipe wall. So these are the challenges that we face. Our stormwater system, we've gone very aggressive in our stormwater system. So in terms of the journey, in about 2012 is when the city of Miami Beach really started to take notice and decided it was time to take decisive action in terms of policies and in moving forward and trying to address what was real, what everybody was seeing. We have a thing called sunny day flooding. Now, sunny day flooding is a phenomenon that's caused by water getting through the pipes because of either a king tide or an unusually high tide, it just comes in. So you'll be driving on a clear day, and this time of the year in Miami Beach, we have incredible weather. So you're driving on a clear day, and you see a road with 3 inches of water on it, and you're wondering, well, how is this possible? It's not raining. It hasn't rained for a week. It's sunny day flooding. That's part of the challenge that we're dealing with. So Miami Beach decided that it was time to take action. So through a series of policies and resolutions by the legislative body of the city of Miami Beach, Miami Beach has slowly progressed and moved forward in trying to adopt very strict guidelines in terms of design, which not only affect the municipality as far as how we address projects, but also private development as well, which is very important because our private developers are our partners in terms of developing the city. Miami Beach is undergoing now a renaissance in terms of the northern part of the beach. For years, the North Beach area was not an area, unless you were a local, it really was not an area that people would go. Everybody knows South Beach. Everybody's heard of South Beach. South Beach has become so congested now, and it's so built up that there really is no real estate left to redevelop. So movement has moved forward to Middle Beach and then North Beach. Now North Beach is a new renaissance. So obviously we have to look at and address and work with our partners in terms of addressing sea level rise. So we've adopted strict guidelines in terms of design criteria for our roads, minimum elevations that we establish in the edge of pavement, and also seawalls. We have 55 miles of seawalls in Miami Beach. Out of those 55 miles, 50 are privately owned. 5 are owned by the city of Miami Beach. We passed an ordinance that says that the top of elevation of the seawall has to be at 5.7. And that 5.7 was established with a series of studies, even looking at NOAA's data that NOAA did several different analyses in the climate resiliency compact. And they had an extreme curve and a low curve. We actually, Miami Beach, adopted the intermediate one. The 5.7 supposedly will carry us, that elevation will carry us to the year 2080. I can tell you that chances are, if we get to 2040 or 2045 at that elevation, that'll be a stretch. Sea level rise is rising exponentially. So all the curves that you see are going up like this, which means we have to take decisive action. So in terms of the seawalls, we're now undergoing a program over the next 5 years to raise the 5 miles of seawalls to that top of elevation of 5.7. But we have our development partners and private owners that have seawalls in the back of their properties because obviously, again, it's a barrier island. A lot of people live either on the bay side or on canals that connect out to the bay. And they have properties that some of those elevations are at 2.4, 2.6. Water on a high tide will go into the property. So we've established an ordinance that specifically says that if you do any work on your house up to a certain dollar amount, you're required to improve your seawall. And we have 2 options. Depending on the cost of the repair, you'll either have to bring it up to an elevation of 4.2, and if it exceeds that cost, and then it's 5.7. So we have to engage the private side because if we don't, government can only do so much. We have limited funding, as everybody knows. Funding is restricted. We have funding for our water and sewer infrastructure. We have funding for our drainage, stormwater enterprise. But those funds are based on a certain indexing. And let's face it, nobody wants to pay more taxes on their bill for improvements. But the reality is, if we don't find other means of funding, we're not going to be able to solve these issues. We're under attack every day in Miami Beach. Every single day it's a challenge, whether it's a broken pipe, it's a street that's flooded. So we have a very aggressive program to address these things. For example, in terms of our stormwater system, we clean the system constantly. Normal routine maintenance for stormwater systems are typically done on a quarterly basis. In some areas of the city, we have to do them on a weekly basis, simply because the system is taxed. We have 28 pump stations for stormwater drainage and expecting another 20 to come online within the next 10 years. And these pump stations some of them are pretty massive. Locating a pump station in a residential neighborhood is a challenge, as you can imagine. Street harmonization, one of the challenges we have because we've adopted a road raising policy to elevate the roads. Well, when you have properties that are a foot or a foot and a half lower than what the road is going to be raised to, that's a real challenge in terms of harmonizing. Getting people to agree to sign harmonization agreements is a real challenge. So these are the things that and it's not mutually exclusive to the City of Miami Beach. We partner a lot with the Florida Department of Transportation. There are 3 roads within the City of Miami Beach that are all state maintained. Alton Road is one project that's going to come up, which is a major thoroughfare that goes straight through all of Miami Beach. And it's an evacuation route. DOT is actually going to be doing projects to replace the infrastructure and to raise Alton Road. The challenge, again, is you have very beautiful homes adjacent to Alton Road that are lower, and now the harmonization has to take effect. So these are real challenges. We have to be creative in our solutions. We like to think in Miami Beach that everything and anything is a possibility. We like to look at different options. We like to look at different technologies, because again, it's not the same solution all the time. It's not one size fits all. We have to be creative in terms of addressing the challenges that are real. And I can tell you, they are real, and we need to be prepared. Within the next decade, the changes in terms of how we address these things has to be radical. So thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Thank you, Joe. For our panel, I'd like to start with a question. How do you think the new legislation, specifically the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the IIJA, will affect future infrastructures as far as climate change? For anyone that would.
I'll go first. So I talked a little bit about EVs, and that's a big deal. And in the infrastructure bill, there is a lot of money to build the network to charge vehicles across the country. Range anxiety is the biggest problem facing EVs till the technology gets longer ranges. So nobody wants to get stuck in traffic on I-95 in an EV right now. So how do we deal with that? So I think the government's investment in the infrastructure is going to jumpstart folks buying these vehicles, and I think that's going to be important for adoption, and then the manufacturers are getting down in that space. I think the other area that is important to help with climate change and carbon reductions is the broadband piece of the infrastructure bill. So this is going to bring broadband into some communities that are underserved today. And you might ask, well, what in the world does broadband have to do with carbon? Mentioned earlier, the customer programs and processes that we're looking at putting in place is going to try to control devices when they charge their car, when their air conditioners are on or off, trying to manage the load to match it with green resources. To be able to do that, you've got to have a communication network, and that broadband will provide that communication network in those underserved areas to allow that ability to control when loads go up and down, when charging happens, when it needs to happen. So that is an important part of the infrastructure bill, I think, to help with carbon that doesn't always have a clear link to that. The other piece that we look at is some of the R&D money for new technologies, whether it's hydrogen, new nuclear. There's going to be some technological carbon capture. There's going to have to be some technologies that we don't have today to get us where we all want to get in the future. And the investment bill has some funds in there to do that.
Can you hear me? Yeah. So I think that was very well said, and but it's also a reflection of this bill being kind of half core programs and half future leaning programs, because that's really the investment that we need to be making right now. We're not dealing with yesterday's problem anymore. I mean, the urgency is accelerating, as Joe was just saying so well. So we have to be creative, and I think it's 550 billion is new projects, and 650 is kind of the core stuff that we've been doing. Engineers are eager to get started on the new stuff. We are eager to start designing for the future. Back in the Obama administration, to kind of dig us out of the recession, we had this shovel-ready push, for all these projects. And at the time, it was determined that it was needed, and I'm sure a lot of people benefited from it. But as far as giving us that view of the future and tackling some of the future problems, we didn't do a lot of that then, and the time is really on us now. So I guess what I'm concerned about, though, is it's a great investment, but when are those monies going to be appropriated? Do we have enough people to do the grant work at the agencies? Whether it's at the federal level or at the local level. Do we have enough people to do the engineering work? I've already, said we're already short of engineers as it is today. So we're going to need 82,000 new engineers. Where are we going to find that? So I think those things are concerns that we all need to take into consideration. This could be the biggest opportunity, ever that we only, that we miss, frankly, or that we only meet, half of the potential because we just don't have the people in the positions to help us get through it. And I don't know what the answer to that is. I wish that I did. But the money is certainly there. We just need to pull it down, figure out how to put it to work, and keep focused on the future because the future's changing every day.
Can everybody? Yeah, perfect. All I got to say is show me the money. We in Miami Beach are, wherever there's money and funds available, we're gladly will accept. Our needs far outweigh our funding. So we apply to numerous grants every year. In fact, this past year, Florida had the Florida Resiliency Grant Program. And we were honored to, the city of Miami Beach actually received $28 million, and $20 million went to one of our neighborhood improvement projects, which is to raise the roads in the southern part of Miami Beach. Received 20 million. It was the largest award, single award for any project. And that is a testament to the folks that put these grants together. But we are constantly looking at different sources. This infrastructure bill, we believe is going to be great for the industry, but as Linda pointed out, there are significant challenges, including the fact that there are not enough engineers out there. We actually are facing that right now. We have job openings at the city of Miami Beach within one of the divisions under Public Works, which is in the engineering division, and it's hard to get people to even apply for positions. And I know. In the transportation industry, I know how difficult it is. I know for NCDOT, for example, I know the challenges you face because we faced them at FDOT, and that was years ago. So there's needs, there's monies available, trying to put, and then resources, trying to put all three to line up, the stars lining up, is going to be challenging. But I'm optimistic. I also am optimistic that this younger generation, that the new young bright engineers that we have, are brighter and they think outside the box, which is something that we really need. As I said in the introduction, I serve with the Florida Engineering Society in a couple of capacities, and I'm interacting with all these young engineers all the time, and I'm incredibly optimistic as to what they bring to the table. It's just finding enough of them to help fill the voids that we have. But funding is key to everything. Show me the money. It really is at the end of the day. And without money, it makes our our problem solving a lot more difficult, because we can spend time doing all the designs in the world and all that, but if there's not the funding to deliver that product, then you have all these projects that are in the shelf and you can't deliver, and that's a real challenge. So yes, I am. I light a candle every night because I lose a lot of sleep over the challenges I face. I light a candle every night that this money will come raining down, and that we can start getting these projects, a lot more of these projects, in the ground rather than just on paper.
It's interesting how vast the impacts will be from energy, broadband, to a gamut of other projects and infrastructure. And after the last couple of weeks is probably the perfect pitch time to pitch your job opening in Miami with the sunny weather. But the next thing we have is the survey question. And for those of you that came in late, we had a survey question on the app. Was, what do you think could be the most affected by changes to transportation infrastructure due to climate change? And it looks like 85% of the respondents said raising of the roads, bridges due to flooding. And I think that speaks right back to Joe's point, and Miami's seems to be Miami's number one issue at the moment. Let's see. At this point, we're going to open up the floor for any questions from the audience. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to stand up and ask your question for the panel. Yes, sir.
I have experienced sunny day flooding. It's quite a phenomenon. You had mentioned how you're leveraging the private industry and the developers to help make improvements to your standard specifications, and I can see that being a pretty easy task. But how do you face the challenges from the contractor industry or transportation builders industry if they start presenting pushbacks on trying to elevate standards on the road and not having sewer systems?
I can tell you that with the contractors that typically work with the city of Miami Beach, they've embraced the new reality, meaning that the road raising is real, new technologies are there, and for the most part, we have had cooperation with the contracting industry. Now, again, I think it all depends on the market you're in. In Miami Beach, because we started early on in, let's say, the mid-2015, when we really started getting aggressive with the sea level rise and neighborhood improvement projects. I think it was a learning curve coming up to that level, but eventually the contractors now realize that is business. If you're going to build in Miami Beach, you have to embrace the new specifications, the new types of pipe material. And yes, some of them are a lot more costly. And I don't need to tell anybody in this room that the price of construction materials has gone through the roof. It's fluctuating. COVID has had a lot to do with that, but it's also the reality of the world that we're living in. It's something that we have to deal with, and we have to educate our contracting partners. Even the development community, and I'm glad you brought that up, at first was very resistant. Oh, we just want to build to what the existing street is. Well, the answer is, if you want to do that, that's fine, but 3 years later, I'm going to come in and I'm going to raise that road, and you're going to have all this construction for the next 3 years in front of this beautiful high-rise that you just built. You don't want to see that. So what we try to do is work with them so that they understand, let's harmonize to get your plans, and we'll try to time it so that either you build it and then we will pay you for it, or that we will build it and the timing will be about the same. So most of the developers, the major developers that we have in Miami Beach, have now faced the new norm. If you're going to build in Miami Beach, you got to embrace the criteria that Miami Beach has established. And our criteria, our design criteria, is codified in our city ordinances. So if you are developing, if you get a permit at the city of Miami Beach, you have to abide by that. So, that's just working through it.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
So Linda, ACC's been fighting years to get an infrastructure bill passed, and now we have it passed. legislators, they get votes on tangible stuff. So how do we protect from having the road to nowhere, the bridge to nowhere? So what is ACC doing to kind of help out with that?
Full disclosure, Melvin is on my executive committee, but I did not plant that question. I said, Melvin's on my executive committee, if you didn't hear me. Yeah, and that is something that we're being challenged by, and I just got off a call this week where we were talking about that. It's funny. I was always, honestly, an advocate for earmarks, and I feel like when we took earmarks off the table in Congress that things came to this grinding halt, and actually I think it also helped to create this current divisiveness that we have. I mean, for good or for bad, earmarks are the lubricant that keep the machines of government working. It's where you get that commitment at the local level, and where, the people at the local level have a voice. They want this project done. Go and fight for that project. Give me an earmark. Earmarks are coming back a little bit, and we're seeing already, we've got some of our members that are in New York that are very concerned about Leader Schumer and the position that he's in and some of the choices that he's making with that funding that isn't necessarily, or the way that he's attempting to direct it, that isn't necessarily consistent with the vision of what everybody else saw, in the IIJA. So that is something that we're going to have to be vigilant about. Luckily at ACEC, we have 52 member organizations, so we're represented at every state, and then we've got 2 regional organizations. So we are going to be working with the legislators at the state and local level, government at the state and local level, and really be on the ground as much as we can to watch what's developing, because we can't waste this opportunity. And making poor choices right now has long-term repercussions. And I think everybody in this room needs to be kind of united in being, shepherds to this opportunity that we're given, and not allow people that don't feel the same way to waste it. Thank you, Melvin.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Greg Dean, Carolinas Concrete Paving Association, and I'm not on your board. But Laura and Neil from our association, our new president leader, passes along her regards. Great comments from the panel. Enjoyed listening to some of the best practices that's happening to date. Something that I think as a country, as a nation, we've got to somehow gather those and be willing and be able to share those, because I think, obviously y'all are facing in individual silos, but we got to be able to share it so that people don't have to keep relearning some of the best practices. I guess my question is, how do we accomplish that? Is there a mechanism out there that gives us that capability to be able to share some of these best practices?
I can jump in on this, and then anybody that wants to follow up. We are, again, we've got a group of us at ACEC that are kind of pulling together ideas for how we can work in the next year and a half to create that kind of exchange. One of the things that we're going to do is we want to bring together all the the relevant engineering societies, and bring them in and talk among ourselves about, what we're going to put out there as best practices, what the standards are that we're expecting to, be held up, and what kinds of projects are the ones that are really in line. And then we're going to bring in the League of Cities, the Conference of Mayors, ALEC, those kind of intergovernmental groups, to share with them what our views are on how this thing should roll out at a high level, and then ask them what kind of pressures that they're feeling, or talk about what some of the skirmishes are at the local level that we need to be aware of. So like with anything, it's the communication, it's the dialogue, and it's just listening to people and being aware. There's so much to do. We want to kind of dig in and just get started, but we need to keep our heads up, look around, listen, and I think that's the only way that we're going to keep it at that high level.
I would add the utility industry has always been very collaborative, and we have trade groups and EEI and others that we can share, and all of us know each other, so we always talk. We get to trade resources during hurricanes and ice storms, so we get to talk then as well. And then EPRI, which is based in Palo Alto, California, they're our research branch for the industry. They really drive new technological changes, and the involvement of all the utilities in that, we're able to find what is the best technology or what is the best new technology that we can adopt. So a lot of sharing goes on, and I always joke that the utilities always operate from the same book, Utility 101. We just maybe be on a different chapter at times. So we're very in lockstep with what we're doing, and what they do in Florida we learn from, what they do in California we learn from. Maybe different what they're dealing with, but we try to apply that everywhere.
And I think one of the points Linda made regarding the different organizations working together is very important in Florida. Before I joined, obviously, as a municipal member now, I can't be a member of ACEC, but I was very heavily involved with ACEC in my prior life. And the Florida Engineering Society and ACEC Florida work very closely. In fact, they're sister organizations that are housed pretty much in the same building in Tallahassee. So legislatively, Florida has a very aggressive program in terms of staying on top of the issues, and that collaboration, even with the American Society of Civil Engineers, it's extremely important. I think it's important that, strength comes in numbers. And I think it's really important that organizations push on issues that are important. I mean, we see the contracting industry all the time because they are very powerful. They have very good lobbyists. Nothing against lobbyists. They're very effective advocates for causes. But they get their point across. Well, same way, the engineering, for the most part, the engineering organizations sometimes tend to be a little shy about it because of, well, we don't want to upset our client. But the truth is that these are issues that not only affect the consultants, but it also affects the clients we represent, the public clients that we represent. And I say we because I'm still in that mindset. But it's important. So strength comes in numbers, and it's important to work together on putting issues like the infrastructure bill is a perfect example where everybody collaborated together to get that voice and that point across to the point where it had been sitting and it had been floating, and everybody got all excited. Oh, there's a transportation bill coming or infrastructure bill coming, and then it would die. Well, it finally came to fruition. Now, hopefully, we'll see the fruits of that labor. But again, strength in numbers. So I'm a firm believer that the more we collaborate together on these issues, the better our chances are of getting funding and getting these issues resolved.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Thank you for those comments, and I completely agree with you. We're on the front lines of what's happening, and I hope that some of the lessons learned at Miami Beach, and I'd be happy to share with any of you some of the challenges, some of the I'll give you my email afterwards. If any of you want to reach out to me, I'm more than happy to share with colleagues on some of the things. But in terms of how because we're so flat and we're so close to the ocean, we have to push water. In some places in South Florida, you can use a thing called a French drain or exfiltration trench, which is great because just the head of the water will push it through the limestone, which is what most of South Florida is basically formed out of, coral lime rock. So it's very porous and it filtrates through. But areas like Miami Beach, French drains don't work because of the tidal influence of the actual level of sea level right there. So we have to use pump stations to be able to pump our water out. So our pumps are designed to be able to not only treat water quality, because water quality is critically important. Remember, we have Biscayne Bay, which is considered outstanding Florida waters. It's protected both federally and state-wise. So we have the ocean that we have to protect, the water quality. And I can tell you, Miami Beach residents are big on their water quality. They're constantly looking out at the water, and they're reporting when they see trash in the water or they see a plume for whatever reasons. So we're getting constant calls. So our pump stations are designed not only to treat the water, but then because of the amount of debris that goes into our storm drainage systems, we have to be able to, and there's been other municipalities that have tried using what they call storm drain covers, which is to really block the trash, and then you can come and do street sweeping and pick it up. Miami Beach, that really doesn't work because the storm drain covers really what end up doing, because we're so low, and it's important to get that water into the system so we can pump it. We did a pilot project, and we ended up flooding the street, and it was, so our systems are designed so we have also trash racks inside. So we have a typical pump station has 3 boxes: the collection box that goes through the treatment, then the trash box, which has trash racks that are cleaned by our stormwater crews that go out and do a constant maintenance on it to clean out the debris. And then it's the final box, which is where the weir is, depending on the control structure and all that, to push the water out. And in some cases, we have flap gates to control it so that you don't have the influx of the seawater. So it's different scenarios, but I can tell you that typical pump stations in Miami, for example, the one that we're underway right now for is the design at First Street. First Street is at the southern point, what's called South Point in Miami Beach, and it's just at the southern tip of the island. And this is it's a massive pump station that's going to handle 84-inch pipe that will be feeding into the pump station. So it'll be triplex. It'll be a triplex pump station by the time it's designed. Its capacity right now, it's I don't know yet design, but preliminary studies show it. We're talking in somewhere in the neighborhood of 80 to 100 million gallons per day. We're talking massive pump stations, and these things have to go in the ground. So you can imagine building these things in the water is also a challenge. So drainage is very tricky in Miami Beach. We're looking at trying to look at new and innovative systems of maybe collecting some of that. I know that's being used in some other locations where you have collection boxes on the ground, and then that water is passed on and slowly fed out into a pumping system. But that really is the only way. And then the real estate is also an issue. Putting these pump stations becomes an issue. The associated equipment that's necessary for these pump stations. You have all the electrical equipment and all that. Well, aesthetics is a big thing, as you know, in Miami Beach. So it has to have the Art Deco feel and all that. So it can't look like an electrical building for a pump station or the housing for a pump station. So those things are all part of the design process. So drainage, Miami Beach takes on many roles, including an architectural element to it. I hope I've addressed your question.
Any other questions?
If I can I just... For anybody that's interested in any information, I'll leave you my email. It's Joe Gomez. It's real simple. Joe Gomez, all together, at miamibeach.fl, miamibeachfl.gov. Joe Gomez at miamibeachfl.gov. Feel free to drop me a line if you need any information. I can, all kinds of stuff that we have available, be happy to share with any of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda, Harry, and Joe. We appreciate y'all being here with us and all your insight. Please join me in thanking our speakers. We'll give them a round of applause. We hope everyone continues to think further about today's discussion and stay with us and join us for lunch down at the exhibit hall. Please don't forget to visit the vendors, and we thank you all. Take care.